Marty Meierotto didn't just live off the grid. He thrived in the wild. His life was one of survival, adventure, and extreme danger. But beneath the rugged exterior is a story of resilience, loss, and sacrifice. And wait until you see what he looks like now. His transformation at 58 will leave you speechless. From humble beginnings in rural Wisconsin to the brutal, unforgiving wilderness of Alaska, Marty carved out a life that few could endure. He built his world with his own hands, but the price he paid was greater than most will ever know. This is the untold story of Marty Meierotto, his struggles, his triumphs, and the truth behind his shocking decision to walk away from fame. Marty Meierotto's journey to the Alaskan wilderness didn't begin in the wild. It started in a small town in Wisconsin, where his love for nature was born. As a child, he was surrounded by endless forests and sprawling fields, a world that felt like one big adventure waiting to be explored. His father, an experienced hunter and trapper, became his greatest teacher. From an early age, Marty learned how to track animals, set traps, and read the land, skills that would one day define his entire way of life. But these weren't just survival lessons. They were the building blocks of a dream that would take him far beyond the woods of Wisconsin. While other kids were dreaming of city lights and fast cars, Marty was fascinated by something different. One day, he stumbled upon a book about Alaskan trappers, men who lived off the land in some of the most extreme conditions on Earth. He pored over every page, captivated by the idea of a life built on nothing but skill, determination, and the ability to survive. Alaska wasn't just a place. It was the ultimate test of man versus nature. And Marty knew, deep down, that one day he would call it home. That day came when he turned 20. With nothing but a beat-up truck, a handful of supplies, and a heart full of determination, Marty left Wisconsin behind. He didn't have a detailed plan, no mapped-out destination, just a vision of the life he wanted. The drive was long and relentless, thousands of miles across rough terrain, with no guarantee of what lay ahead. The closer he got to Alaska, the more real the dream became. But as he soon discovered, dreaming about survival and actually surviving were two very different things. His first winter in Alaska was a brutal wake-up call. With no permanent shelter, no backup plan, and temperatures plunging to dangerous lows, Marty quickly learned that the wilderness didn't care about dreams. It only respected those who could endure. He set up a makeshift camp, relying on the trapping skills his father had taught him. Some nights, he had nothing but a fire and a thin layer of canvas between him and the unforgiving cold. Food was whatever he could catch, sometimes a rabbit, sometimes a fish pulled from beneath the ice. There were moments when doubt crept in, when the isolation felt crushing, when hunger gnawed at him. But giving up was never an option. Slowly, he began to master the land. He learned the patterns of the wildlife, the rhythm of the seasons, the unspoken rules of surviving in a place where one mistake could mean death. And then, with his own hands, he built a home. A small cabin, made from the very trees that surrounded him. It wasn't much, just 4 walls, a roof, and a wood-burning stove. But to Marty, it was everything. It was proof that he belonged here, that he had earned his place in the wilderness. Standing outside that cabin, surrounded by nothing but snow-covered mountains and endless forests, Marty felt something he had never felt before: true freedom. No roads, no crowds, no distractions. Just the raw, untamed beauty of the Alaskan wilderness. This wasn't just survival anymore. This was home. And for Marty Meierotto, there was no turning back. The dream of Alaska was one thing, Surviving it was another. For Marty Meierotto, every single day in the wilderness was a test, a battle against the elements, hunger, and isolation. The harsh reality of living off the land set in quickly. There were no grocery stores, no modern conveniences, just his own skill and determination standing between him and starvation. Trapping wasn't just a hobby, it was life or death. Each day, he set his traps, hoping to catch enough to get by. Some days were good, fresh meat, enough fur to trade. Other days, the traps were empty, the hunger growing stronger with each passing hour. Isolation was another challenge. Weeks, sometimes months, would pass without a single human voice. No phones, no internet, no connection to the outside world. The silence of the Alaskan wilderness was deafening, broken only by the howling wind or the distant cry of a wolf. There were times when the loneliness crept in, a reminder that if something went wrong, no one was coming to help. Out here, you didn't get second chances. Then there was the cold, an unforgiving, relentless force that could break even the toughest men. Sub-zero temperatures turned the simplest tasks into brutal endurance tests. Water froze solid in minutes, hands went numb within seconds, and the wrong move could mean frostbite, or worse. Building a fire wasn't just about comfort. It was about survival. Without it, the cold would seep into his bones, stealing his strength, his energy, his will to keep going. And if the cold didn't get you, the wildlife might. Bears, wolves, wolverines, each one a deadly threat, each one a reminder that man was not the apex predator here. Marty learned to coexist with them, to respect their territory, but he never let his guard down. One mistake, one misstep, and he could easily become part of the food chain. The wilderness didn't just test his body, it tested his mind. There were nights when he lay awake in his cabin, listening to the wind howl outside, wondering if he had made the right choice. There were times when exhaustion weighed him down, when injuries slowed him to a crawl. A misstep on the ice, a deep cut from an axe, a fall that left him breathless. Every injury was a reminder that he was alone. No hospitals, no quick fixes. If he wanted to heal, he had to do it himself. But despite the hardships, despite the relentless challenges, Marty wouldn't trade this life for anything. Because in those moments of struggle, he found something that most people never do: true freedom. He wasn't trapped in an office, staring at a screen, living by someone else's rules. He was out here, in the wild, answering only to nature. There was no greater feeling than waking up to a crisp, untouched snowfall, knowing that everything he had earned. The struggle made the victories sweeter. The silence made the small joys even greater. With every challenge, he became stronger. He learned the rhythms of the land, the secrets hidden in the snow, the unspoken language of the forest. He wasn't just surviving anymore, he was thriving. Alaska wasn't just his home, it was part of him. And no amount of hardship could ever take that away. For years, Marty Meierotto lived in complete solitude, far away from cameras, crowds, and the noise of modern life. But that all changed when the History Channel came calling. Mountain Men was looking for real survivalists, people who didn't just play the part, but lived it every single day. And there was no one more qualified than Marty. His rugged, no-nonsense approach to life in the Alaskan wilderness was exactly what the show needed. At first, Marty was hesitant. He hadn't built his life in the wild to become a television star. He wasn't interested in fame, in bright lights, or scripted drama. His life wasn't for show. It was real, raw, and sometimes brutal. But eventually, he agreed, seeing it as an opportunity to share the reality of life off the grid. If people wanted to understand what it truly took to survive in Alaska, he was willing to show them. From the moment Mountain Men aired, Marty stood out. He wasn't like the other reality TV stars. He wasn't there for attention. He wasn't exaggerating for the cameras. Everything he did was authentic. Whether he was trapping in the deep snow, repairing his cabin, or trekking through the wilderness, it was all part of his daily life. He wasn't just demonstrating survival techniques, he was surviving every single day. Viewers connected with him instantly. His quiet, humble nature and unwavering work ethic made him a fan favorite. He didn't need flashy gimmicks or dramatic storytelling. His life was already an adventure, and audiences respected him for it. But with fame came consequences Marty never anticipated. Almost overnight, he went from being an anonymous trapper in the Alaskan wilderness to a recognized face across the country. People knew his name, stopped him in town, wanted to talk, wanted pictures. It was a strange and uncomfortable shift. He had spent his entire life avoiding the spotlight, and now it followed him wherever he went. Filming itself presented its own set of challenges. Living off the grid meant adapting to nature's unpredictable conditions, but now there were cameras capturing every move. The presence of a film crew disrupted the solitude that had once been his greatest source of peace. He had to balance his real-life survival work with the demands of television production, setting up shots, repeating actions, dealing with the interruptions that came with creating a show. And the deeper into the series he went, the more he questioned if this was the life he wanted. For Marty, Mountain Men was never about being famous. It was about sharing the truth of what it meant to live in the wild. And while the show gave him a platform to do that, it also came at a price. The simple, quiet life he had fought so hard to build was no longer so simple. And the question that lingered in the back of his mind was one he couldn't ignore forever. How much of his freedom was he willing to sacrifice for the sake of the show? The Alaskan wilderness doesn't forgive mistakes. For Marty Meierotto, every day was a gamble. One wrong move, one moment of bad luck, and it could all be over. He had spent years sharpening his survival skills, but nothing could fully prepare him for the dangers that lurked in the cold, silent expanse of the wild. One of the closest calls of his life came on what should have been a routine trap check. He had taken his snowmobile deep into the forest, miles from his cabin, when suddenly, disaster struck. The engine sputtered, then died. There was no cell service, no way to call for help, just an endless stretch of frozen land and a blizzard closing in fast. Alone in temperatures that could kill a man in hours, Marty had no choice but to rely on his instincts. He immediately got to work, carving out a makeshift snow shelter. It wasn't much, but it was enough to block the wind and keep his body from freezing. He rationed what little food he had and braced himself for the long night ahead. The cold seeped into his bones, testing his endurance with every passing hour. But he knew staying put meant death. The only way to survive was to move. At first light, he started walking. The snow was deep, the wind unforgiving, but step by step, he pushed forward. For 2 days, he battled exhaustion, hunger, and the brutal Alaskan winter, driven only by sheer willpower. When he finally reached his cabin, collapsing from exhaustion, he knew just how close he had come to never making it home. But that wasn't the only time Marty had faced the harsh reality of living on the edge. In the wild, every day was a fight to survive, and he had long accepted that death was always near. Unlike most people, he didn't fear it. He respected it. The wilderness had its own rules, and if you didn't follow them, you didn't make it. He had seen firsthand what happened when nature decided it was your time. One of the hardest moments of his life was losing a fellow trapper, a man who had shared the same love for the wild, the same understanding of its beauty and brutality. He had gone out on a routine run, just like Marty had done 1,000 times before. But something went wrong. No one heard from him for days. The search party braved the freezing cold, holding on to the hope that he had simply gotten lost, that he would turn up, cold but alive. But when the snow finally melted, they found him. It was a painful reminder that even the most experienced outdoorsmen weren't invincible. That loss weighed on Marty. He had spent years surviving in one of the harshest environments on Earth, but even he wasn't immune to tragedy. It forced him to think about his own mortality, about what it truly meant to live in the wild. He knew that one day it could be him. But that never made him reconsider his way of life. It only made him appreciate every moment even more. And then there were the accidents that nearly ended his story. One winter, while repairing his cabin, he was lifting a heavy wooden beam when disaster struck. The plank slipped, crashing down onto his shoulder and back, knocking him unconscious. When he came to, the pain was unbearable. He was miles from any help, deep in the wilderness, with no one to call and no time to rest. His body screamed for him to stop, but stopping wasn't an option. If he didn't finish the repairs, if he didn't keep going, the brutal Alaskan winter would finish the job. So he fought through the pain. He wrapped his injuries as best he could, forced himself back to his feet, and did what needed to be done. Because out here, survival didn't wait for you to heal. You either pushed through, or you didn't make it. For Marty Meierotto, death had always been just around the corner. He had seen it, faced it, even felt its breath on his neck. But it never stopped him. Because he knew something that most people didn't. True freedom comes at a price. And for him, it was a price worth paying. For all the dangers, the isolation, and the relentless struggle to survive, there was one thing that kept Marty Meierotto going: his family. The wild may have shaped him, but his wife and daughter gave his life meaning. Without them, even the most breathtaking Alaskan landscape would feel empty. Marty's wife, Dominique, was more than just his partner. She was his rock. She didn't just love him, she believed in him, in the life they had built together, in the sacrifices it took to make it work. Most people wouldn't trade a comfortable home for a remote cabin in the freezing wilderness, but Dominique wasn't most people. She embraced the challenge, knowing that this life, despite its hardships, was the one Marty was meant to live. The long, brutal winters, the months without modern conveniences, the constant uncertainty of survival. It wasn't easy, but she stood by him through every storm, through every setback. While Marty was out in the wilderness, trapping and braving the elements, she kept their home running, making sure their family was warm, fed, and safe. She wasn't just supporting his way of life, she was living it with him. But for all the sacrifices, there was one thing that made every hardship worth it: their daughter, Noah. From the moment she was born, Marty knew everything had changed. The wild had always been his home, his calling, but fatherhood became something even greater. No longer was he just surviving for himself. He was building something for his daughter, teaching her the values that the wilderness had taught him. He didn't just want Noah to live in the wild, he wanted her to understand it, to respect it, to be strong enough to handle it. He taught her how to use a knife, how to build a fire, how to read the land. While other kids grew up surrounded by screens and city noise, Noah grew up in the heart of nature, where survival was more than just a lesson. It was a way of life. Watching her learn, watching her grow, became Marty's greatest joy. Seeing her confidence build as she mastered each new skill reminded him why he had chosen this life in the first place. It wasn't just about escaping the modern world, it was about living with purpose, about passing down something real, something lasting. On the hardest days, when the cold was bone deep and the weight of survival pressed down on him, it was his family that kept him going. The thought of coming home to Dominique and Noah, of sitting by the fire after a long day, of sharing a meal they had worked hard to put on the table. That was what mattered. Out in the wild, it was easy to feel alone. But Marty never truly was. Even in the most brutal conditions, in the most dangerous moments, he carried with him the love of his wife and daughter. They were his anchor, his reason to push forward, his reminder that no matter how far he roamed, he always had a home to come back to. For all the freedom the wilderness offered, for all the adventures and challenges, Marty knew one thing above all else. Family was the greatest thing he had ever built. Living off the land has always been a way of life for Marty Meierotto, but not everyone sees it that way. Over the years, he's faced sharp criticism, particularly from animal rights activists who believe that trapping is cruel and outdated. To them, the idea of setting traps in the wilderness is unnecessary in today's world, where grocery stores are stocked and modern society no longer relies on fur for survival. But for Marty, trapping isn't about sport or profit. It's about balance. Alaska is a place where nature rules, and every species plays a role in the ecosystem. Without responsible trapping, populations of certain animals can grow unchecked, leading to disease and starvation. Marty has always followed strict regulations, ensuring that he only takes what is necessary and never more than the land can afford to give. To him, it's a sustainable practice, one that has existed for centuries and continues to be an essential part of life in the wild. He's not interested in debating ethics with those who have never spent a night alone in the freezing wilderness. He knows the truth, and that's enough. But trapping wasn't the only controversy surrounding Marty. When Mountain Men became a massive success, some fans started questioning whether the show was as real as it seemed. Could a man truly live this way, day in and day out, without exaggeration? Were the dangers as serious as the cameras made them look? Some skeptics argued that certain scenes were staged for drama, that the risks were played up to keep audiences engaged. Marty never paid much attention to the rumors. To him, the cameras were just another obstacle, one more thing to work around in a life already filled with challenges. Whether they were there or not, the reality of his existence didn't change. He still had to battle the cold, hunt for food, and survive in one of the harshest environments on Earth. "The wild doesn't care about cameras," he once said. "It doesn't care if people believe it or not. It just is." To those who questioned his authenticity, Marty had only one response: come out here and try it yourself. Spend a winter in the Arctic Circle, miles from civilization, with no safety net, no modern conveniences, and no guarantee of making it through the night. Survive in a world where the temperature can drop to 50 below, where every decision could be the difference between life and death. Then, and only then, would they understand. Marty never needed approval. He wasn't looking for fame, and he certainly wasn't looking for validation from people who had never lived a day in the wild. The criticisms, the controversies, they were just noise. At the end of the day, when the cameras were gone and the show was over, he was still out there, doing what he had always done: living, surviving, thriving in a world most people would never dare to enter. For years, Mountain Men brought Marty Meierotto into the homes of millions, turning him into a household name. The show gave him money, recognition, and a platform to share his way of life. But with all of that came something Marty never wanted: attention. The cameras, the production schedules, the constant presence of a crew, it all started to pull him away from the very thing that made his life so special. The wilderness was meant to be his escape, his sanctuary. But as the seasons passed, it started to feel less like freedom and more like a stage. Marty had never set out to be famous. He wasn't chasing a spotlight or looking to build a career in television. He just wanted to live, on his own terms, in the quiet solitude of the Alaskan wilderness. But the cameras made that harder. The simple moments of his life, checking traps, repairing his cabin, trekking through the snow, were no longer just his. They belonged to the audience, to the producers, to the world watching through their screens. The decision to leave Mountain Men wasn't easy, but it was necessary. He had spent years sharing his life with viewers, but deep down, he knew it was time to take it back. The show had given him a platform, but it had also taken away the one thing he valued most: his peace. It was time to walk away, to return to the life he had built long before the cameras ever showed up. More than anything, it was his family that made the decision clear. Marty had spent years braving the harshest conditions, pushing himself to the limits, but nothing mattered more than being there for his daughter, Noah. She was growing up fast, and he didn't want to miss another moment. The time spent away, the long filming schedules, the distractions of television, it all pulled him away from the one thing that truly mattered. And for Marty, there was no amount of fame or money that could replace the moments he wanted to share with his family. So, he chose them. He chose a life away from the cameras, away from the noise, back to the silence of the wilderness. It was never about quitting. It was about reclaiming what had always been his. So where is Marty Meierotto now? At 65, he's still the same man he's always been. Only now, he lives on his own terms once again. No cameras, no schedules, no interruptions. Just the land, the sky, and the quiet freedom he fought so hard to keep. His beard is a little longer, his pace a little slower, but the fire in his eyes is the same. The wild hasn't let him go, and he hasn't let it go either. Has he truly left the spotlight forever? Maybe. Or maybe one day, he'll share more of his story. But for now, Marty Meierotto is exactly where he wants to be. Home, in the heart of Alaska, living the life he was always meant to live. Marty Meierotto's story is more than just the tale of a man surviving in the wild. It's a testament to resilience, independence, and the unbreakable human spirit. He never set out to be a celebrity, never craved attention or fame. What he wanted was something far more valuable: the freedom to live on his own terms. From a young boy in Wisconsin dreaming of Alaska to a seasoned trapper battling the harshest conditions on Earth, Marty carved out a life that few could endure. He faced brutal winters, near-death experiences, and the constant uncertainty of survival. Yet through it all, he never wavered. He adapted, he endured, and he thrived. But Marty's legacy isn't just about survival, it's about choice. The choice to leave behind the conveniences of modern life. The choice to embrace solitude, to respect nature, to live in harmony with the land rather than control it. And perhaps most importantly, the choice to walk away from fame and return to the life he truly loved. His story is a rare one in today's world, a reminder that happiness doesn't come from wealth, technology, or status. It comes from knowing who you are, from living a life that feels right, no matter how unconventional it may seem to others. Marty didn't follow the path that was expected of him. He blazed his own trail, one that led him deep into the Alaskan wilderness and, ultimately, to true freedom. And now, as he enjoys the quiet solitude he always longed for, his story continues to inspire. He proved that real strength isn't about conquering nature, it's about respecting it. That success isn't measured in money or fame, it's measured in the ability to live a life that feels fulfilling. So, would you ever trade city life for the wild? Could you walk away from everything and start over in the heart of nature? Let us know in the comments. And if Marty's story inspired you, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss another story like this one. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.